Chapter 1. Jilted. High Wycombe, Buckinghamshire, Summer Solstice, 1891. Sterling returned home to Bramble Manor late yesterday afternoon, but he wasn't alone. Eudora Yates winced. "Oh, Clare, my brother brought his wife." Clare stared at the young woman, uncomprehending. "His what?" "Lottie and Sterling were married on the ship from India." As the news sank in, her knees grew wobbly, and she was obliged to sink down on a needlepoint-covered tuffet. The walls of the cosy parlour seemed to close in on her, and she felt dizzy. I hadn't had a letter from him in weeks," she managed. "Now you know why." Clare fumbled for some way to make sense of an event which had just utterly and completely ruined her life. She glanced up at Dora, who was pacing as if she were a caged, spectacularly plumed bird. "Why didn't Sterling come with you? Isn't he planning to explain himself to me properly?" Dora shook her head. "He implored me to come in his stead. I rather imagine Lottie forbade him from seeing you. In fact, I'm sure of it." "I can't believe this." Clare's lips were so numb she could barely form the words. "It goes without saying, Papa and Mamma are furious with him." Dora crossed over to sit on the chair nearest the tuffet. "I'm really very sorry." Clare's vision swam, and she suddenly felt cold. "And the ring of engagement?" Dora swallowed and averted her eyes. "It's a family heirloom, so Sterling pleads for its return." Although Clare had been stunned until now, her temper flared at last. "Does he indeed?" She shot to her feet, tugged the opal ring off her finger, and pressed it into Dora's gloved hand. "Anything else?" "Yes." Another wince crossed the girl's features. "Sterling requests the return of his letters." A lift at the end of the sentence made it sound like a question. "Ha!" Clare's spine straightened. "Upon that point he must remain unsatisfied. I reserve the right to burn them myself." She moved to the window, half expecting to see black storm clouds rolling across the sky. Instead, the midsummer morning sunshine was unaccountably cheerful. "I told him not to ask, but he insisted." Dora stood and joined her at the window. "As I said, Mamma and Papa are put out with Sterling for being a jilt. Furthermore, they aren't happy he married a nobody." Clare's shoulders moved up and down in the semblance of a shrug. "The Ladd family is hardly prominent. Perhaps Lord and Lady Yates should be relieved at Sterling's narrow escape." "Don't be silly. After all, your father was a prominent barrister before he retired." She sighed. "Unfortunately, jilting you so publicly reflects poorly on Sterling and casts our entire family in a bad light." Clare gave the young woman a sharp glance. "I wouldn't be too concerned about it. By the time you're ready to make your debut next spring, society will have moved on to some other scandal. Your reputation will be untainted by your brother's minor misstep. But mine is another matter." She made no attempt to keep the ice from her tone, and Dora had the grace to blush. "I suppose you think me selfish to worry about how this affects me, and you're right. But now that Sterling has chosen to misbehave, my chances of marrying well diminish accordingly." Clare's lips tightened. "Quite so. Once you've come of age, you've only a few short years in which to catch a husband. After all, if a girl can't marry before she's considered on the shelf, she becomes a horrible embarrassment." "Exactly." As the implication of her reply sank in, Dora's blush deepened, and she began to babble. "I didn't... Sterling's wife, Lottie, is insufferable, and I can't help but hate her. You and Sterling were engaged for so long. I've come to think of you as a member of our family. Mamma and Papa feel the same way." A sense of decency surfaced, albeit grudgingly. "Don't hate your sister-in-law. None of this is her fault." "Isn't it? Lottie drew Sterling in." Clare looked at her askance.